Welcome back to Discover the Wonders. So today we are talking about stones, rocks, and ladders. So last week we talked about disguises, and I told you the story of Jacob and Esau and how Jacob disguised himself and treated him. He disguised himself and he tricked his brother out of his birthright and blessings. And then his brother got so angry that he wanted to kill Jacob. And so now Jacob has to run away to be safe. And so Rebekah has told him to go back to where she came from and find a wife back there. And so Isaac agrees too. So he goes on his way. So he's got to travel a very long way, and he doesn't have much with him, and he feels a little bit bad and guilty about what he's done. So he got what he wanted, which maybe he felt good about that, but he didn't get it in the right way. So God had promised that he would be the one who would get the older son's blessings and privileges, even though he was the younger son, even though they were both twins, but Esau came out first. So, he valued what God said, but he went about his own way to get it. So he's happy he's got the blessings, but now he's got to run for his life away from his brother. So he's kind of ruined the relationship that he had with his brother, and he's got to leave his parents and go far away. But that night he stopped somewhere to go to sleep. Now he doesn't have a tent and camping stuff with him, so he just lays down on the ground, and he has no pillow with him either. I guess if you've got to walk, you don't carry too much stuff with you. And so he uses a stone for his pillow. Can you imagine how uncomfortable that would be, sleeping on a stone, putting your head on a stone? So he manages to sleep, because he goes to sleep, and while he is sleeping, he has an amazing dream. So he dreams that there is a ladder going from the ground right up into heaven. Now, either a ladder or it might have been more of a staircase. I'm not sure which, but so he dreams about this ladder that goes all the way right up to heaven, and there are angels going up and down this ladder. Now, that's an unusual dream to have. And then at the top of the ladder, God is there, and he starts talking to Jacob. And he says, I am the God of Abraham and of Isaac, and I will be your God as well. And all this land around you, I'm going to give it to you and to your children and grandchildren. So he's giving Jacob a very similar promise to what he had given to Abraham and to Isaac. And so he says to Jacob, don't be afraid. I will be with you, and I will bring you back safely to your home again. Wow, that's a pretty neat promise to get from God while you are asleep. And so Jacob wakes up, and he's like, wow, he'd just gone to bed, he's run away from home, he's gone to sleep, and then he wakes up and he realizes that God is right there with him. He was so full of awe and wonder that God was right there with him. And he said, I didn't know that God was right here with me. And then, and he said, this place, it is the gate of heaven. It is the house of God, because he felt God was so near to him. You know what? God is everywhere. So wherever we go, God is there. But when we follow God and when we listen and obey him, then God promises to be with us in a very special way. And he's just promised to be near to Jacob in a special way. So God is everywhere, but he's with those who follow him in a very special and a very close way. Now, Jacob doesn't want to forget what he's seen in his dream. And so he gets his stone that he'd used for a pillow, and he sets it up more as a pillar, as a reminder of what happened when he was asleep, and he called it Bethel. And then he made a promise to God too. He said, if you will be my God and you will keep me safe, then I will follow you all my life, and I will give you anything you give to me, I will give 10% of it back to you. So that was the promise he made to God. But I'm just going to read you a verse from the Bible, which is not out of this story, but it is very similar to the words that God said to Jacob. So it is a promise from the Bible, and it's very similar to what God said to Jacob. So starts off with, "Fear thou not, for I am with thee."
Fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee, yea, I will help thee, yea, I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness. Fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee, yea, I will help thee, yea, I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness.
So that is a very neat promise from the Bible, that we don't need to be afraid because God is with us and he will help us. So let's talk about ladders for a little bit. So ladders help us to reach high places. So there is a place in China where there was a village that was way up in the mountains, and to get there you had to go up a cliff, and so there were kind of homemade ladders to get up there, which is quite scary. And like little kids, they'd have to go to school and they'd have to climb up and down these ladders, and it was quite like a long way to go. And so later on, some better ladders were built for these people, so they had like handrails, and they were just a lot safer and a lot better and a lot stronger. And then a long time later, a village was made like lower down in the mountains so that these people could move and be in a safer place and not have to go up and down these ladders just to leave their village. So a ladder can get us to high places. Now, also in China, there was a Chinese artist. He made a fireworks display that looked like a ladder going up into the sky. So in 2015, he did this. He'd already tried a few times and it hadn't worked out before. And he did this to celebrate his grandma's 100th birthday. And he was in a little fishing village in China. Now, I saw a video of this ladder and I thought, how on earth did he do that? Because it looks like fireworks going up in the shape of a ladder. But he had planned this for a long time. And he needed like a helium balloon, which helped hold up, I think had like wires and stuff in the shape of a ladder. And then he had fireworks and I think even gunpowder, which made it look like this fireworks ladder going just up into the sky. It's quite neat. And when he did it, not many people knew about it, but somebody videoed it, and that video kind of went viral, and then lots of people knew about it. So that was really a ladder going right up into the sky, a little bit like Jacob's dream. But, you know, a ladder, it helps us to reach high places. And in Jacob's ladder, like in Jacob's dream, there was a ladder going from earth up to the sky, or from heaven down to earth. And, you know, that reminds me of Jesus. Jesus is like a ladder. It is only through Jesus that we can have a right relationship with God and be able to go to heaven, because our sin separates us from God. But Jesus is the ladder, which that he made a way for us to be able to go to God and to have our sins forgiven and to be able to go to heaven. So Jesus is like a ladder. Now, there's also a natural ladder in France, which is quite interesting. So it was this iron ladder, and it was going up out of this water, and the water was filled with minerals, and over time most of the ladder, so the part of the ladder that was in the water, it all fossilized and it became limestone. And so as it sat in the water, it changed as it fossilized. And so now like the top part of the ladder is still iron, looks like a normal ladder. But then all the rest of the ladder, it looks like all rocky. It looks really different. So it's quite amazing how just sitting in that water filled with minerals, it changed the ladder and it fossilized it. So it looks quite unusual. But I thought that those waters that are filled with minerals are a little bit like the Bible. It changes us. When we meditate on it, when we learn it, we know it, and we think about it, and we apply it to our lives, it changes us. It changes the way we think. It changes the way we act. It changes the way we talk. All in a good way, it changes us. We don't become a fossil, but we become more like Jesus Christ. And it's not just the Bible that is like that, but anything that we are around a lot, whether it's people or whether it's watching TV or anything like that, we tend to become like who we hang around or what we read or what we watch. So if we remember the Bible is like those waters filled with minerals, if we will learn it and do what it says, then it will change us in a positive way. But I'm just going to sing a song called Jacob's Ladder. We are climbing Jacob's Ladder.
We are climbing Jacob's ladder. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. Soldiers of the cross. Every round goes higher, higher. Every round goes higher, higher. Every round goes higher, higher. Soldiers of the cross. Sinner, do you love my Jesus? Sinner, do you love my Jesus? Sinner, do you love my Jesus? Soldiers of the cross. If you love him, why not serve him? If you love him, why not serve him? If you love him, why not serve him? Soldiers of the cross.
Now let's talk about rocks and stones. So there is another special thing in France, and it is a palace which is made completely out of stones and like pebbles. So there was a postman in France who was just going about his job, doing his rounds and delivering letters, and he tripped over an unusual stone. And this stone got him thinking and got him dreaming, and he decided to build a palace out of stones. So as he would go about his rounds, he started to collect stones that he found. So first he just filled up his pockets, but you can imagine how heavy his pockets would get after a while. So then he started taking a basket with him and filling the basket up. And then in the end, he would take a wheelbarrow with him and he would fill it up with stones as he went on his rounds. It took him 30 years to build a palace. But this palace looks really special. It's not just made out of stones. It's got he's a real artist. So he made lots of different shapes and kind of pictures out of the stones. It looks really incredible. And he spent 30 years of his life building this stone palace. And then when he finally finished it, he spent another 8 years building kind of like a grave or a fancy place to be buried. Took him 8 years to build that. So that is a really neat palace in France that would be neat to visit, made out of stones. But you know what? When you build a building, what matters the most is not how fancy it is, but what it's built on. Because when you build a house or a palace or anything, it needs to be built on a strong foundation. You need to build it on concrete or something firm. And yeah, there's a story that Jesus told about two men who built a house. One of them built a house on the rock. And so when the storms came and it rained and the floods came, the house didn't move. It just stayed there. Whereas the man who had built his house on the sand, when the storm came and the floods came and the rain came, his house fell down. And Jesus used this story, and he said that anybody who hears his words, so the words in the Bible, if we do and we believe what they say and we do them, we apply them to our life, then it's like we're building our life on a rock. And then when things go wrong, as things go wrong for everybody sometimes, then we will still be okay because we'll be on a strong foundation. But if we don't listen and we won't build our life on Jesus and what he says, then we'll be like that foolish man building a house on the sand. We might be all right for a while, but then when the bad things happen and the storms come, then we can go to pieces. So I'm going to sing you this story straight out of the Bible.
Whosoever heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them, I will liken him unto a wise man which built his house upon the rock. And the rain descended and the floods came and the winds blew and beat upon that house, and it fell not, for it was founded upon a rock. And everyone that heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them not shall be likened unto a foolish man which built his house upon the sand. And the rain descended and the floods came and the winds blew and beat upon that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it.
Now I'm going to sing one more song, which is about the same story, but it's called Two Little Houses by the Seaside.
Two little houses by the seaside, two little houses neat and wide. One day a terrible storm arose, and it fell by the seaside. Crash, 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 how the thunder roared. Flash, 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 how the lightning flared. Slosh, 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 how the rain did pour on the houses on the sand and stone. One little house stood firm and tall. One little house had a terrible fall. Build on the rock if you build at all, and you'll never, never fall. Two little houses by the seaside, two little houses neat and wide. One day a terrible storm arose, and it fell by the seaside. Crash, 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 how the thunder roared. Flash, 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 how the lightning flared. Slosh, 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 how the rain did pour on the houses on the sand and stone. One little house stood firm and tall. One little house had a terrible fall. Build on the rock if you build at all, and you'll never, never fall.
Now I'm going to tell you a story about someone who threw stones. So this story is about a set of twins. Their names were Daisy and Dan. Now, when they were babies, they had moved a long way away, and their grandma still lived where they'd come from. So they lived a very long way from their grandma, and so they hadn't seen her in a very long time. And I don't think they must have seen photos of her either. So she would write letters, and they would kind of learn about her in that way, and their mother would tell them about their grandmother. But one day they got a letter, and it said that she was going to come and visit them. So they were very excited. They were finally going to see their grandma, and they started to plan all the things that they could do with her while she was there. So she was going to come on a Thursday evening at 6 o'clock, and the children were allowed to go and meet her at the train station. But before she came, it was about just after 3 o'clock, the children had got back from school, and their mum asked them to go down to the shop and to get a few ingredients for dinner. She also gave them a little bit of extra money, and they were allowed to buy some treats, like some lollies for themselves. So they started walking down to the shop, and on the way they met up with a group of kids that they were not usually allowed to play with. Now the reason was these children, this group of kids, they were very rude and disrespectful, and so their mother, the twins' mother, didn't want her children becoming like that. And yeah, if you hang around people who are like that, often you change and you start to become like them. But Daisy and Dan, they started walking along with these kids on the way to the shop. Now they came to an empty lot, so like a place where there was no house. It was just all empty, just grass, and then there was a rock pile. So it was this pile of rock that was all crushed up. And by this rock pile, there was an old lady standing there, and she had a bag. Now she started talking kindly to this group of kids and to Daisy and Dan, but one of those other boys just talked back to her really rudely and then stuck out his tongue. So now maybe you can see why Daisy and Dan's mum didn't really want her children hanging out with these kids. Now this old lady was a little bit shocked at this rude boy, and she said to him, "Young man, somebody needs to teach you how to be a gentleman." And this boy looked at her and said, "Oh, really?" And then he picked up one of those rocks and threw it at her. Now that's a bit shocking. Throwing a rock at an old person. You know, I actually saw something like this happen once, but it wasn't with a rock. But I was driving in my car into Stratford a long time ago because I lived in Taranaki then. And there was an old man walking along the footpath. And there was a van in front of me with two guys driving along in the van. And the guy who was driving wound down his window, and then he threw his empty bottle, at this old man. I couldn't believe what I saw, seeing a young guy throw a bottle at an old man and try to hit him. And that guy and who he was with probably thought it was funny, because why else would you do something like that? But that is really a shocking way to treat old people. Old people deserve lots of respect. And so this boy in our story starts throwing stones. And the other kids, instead of standing up for what's right and standing up for this old lady, they just join in and start throwing stones too. But what about Daisy and Dan? They know much better than that. Their mum has taught them to be respectful and to have good manners, and especially to treat elderly people with respect. But they don't want to be different than these kids, so they start picking up stones and they start throwing them too. Now, Daisy couldn't throw straight at all, so she didn't hit the old lady, but Dan hit her right on her hand. And then on they went to the shop. They got their ingredients, they got some lollies, and when they came out, that group of kids was still standing there and waiting, so they shared some of their lollies with this group of kids. And then Daisy and Dan went home, but they are in for a shock. When they open the door and they go into their home, this old lady that they saw on the way was sitting in their lounge, and their mother was crying. And their mother was trying to fix up this lady's hand from where Dan had thrown the stone. So the mum is crying, and she says to the twins, "Come and meet your grandmother. She got to town early, and so she walked here. And on the way, some very rude children started throwing stones at her. So you guys are going to have to be extra kind to her because of how those children treated her. Now, Daisy and Dan are horrified. They did not know it was their grandma. But whether it was their grandma or not, it was still a very wrong way to treat somebody. And so that grandmother looks at them and they think, oh no, she's going to tell Mum what we did. But the grandma just said, are these my grandchildren? I wouldn't have expected that. But she did not tell the mother what they had done. But Daisy and Dan are not excited to be with their grandma anymore. They get out of the room as fast as they can because they feel very guilty, very mean, and now they don't want to be with her anymore. And so as time went on, they stayed away from her as much as they could. And their mum was really puzzled. And so she said to the grandma, when the twins were not around, I don't know why the twins are acting so strange. They were so looking forward to seeing you. They were planning all the things they were going to do with you. And now they don't even want to be around you. As she said this, Daisy was walking past the window and she heard what her mum said. And so she stopped and listened because she thought that surely Grandma would explain to their mum what they had done. But Grandma didn't say anything. And Daisy just felt so mean and so guilty that she could not handle it anymore. She went running inside and she went and told her mum exactly what she'd done. She was crying and she apologized to her grandma and said, please forgive me. And then Grandma looked up and Dan was standing there too. He had been listening. He'd come into the room and was listening. And he started to cry as well. And he said, I was even worse than Daisy, Mum. I threw the stone that hit Grandma's hand. And he started asking his grandma for forgiveness. And Grandma did forgive both of them. She had a little talk to them and said, if you're going to hang around kids like that, kids that do what's wrong, you're going to become like them. You're going to start acting like them as well. And then she told them that children who have good manners and who are respectful and kind, they grow up to be the best adults. And then she said, all right, now it's forgiven and it's forgotten. But Daisy and Dan could not forget what they had done. Every time they saw Grandma or read a letter from her or even thought about her, they would remember what they had done, and they learned their lesson. But our words can also be like stones, because I doubt that you would ever throw a stone at people like these children did. I don't think I know anybody who would pick up a stone and throw it at somebody. But our words are also like stones. Our words can damage people's feelings. And so we might not pick up a stone and throw it at somebody, but we may use our words to hurt people, just like stones hurt people. We can hurt people's feelings. So we need to be careful that we use our words to help and encourage other people and not to hurt them like stones do. So I'm going to sing a little bit of one song called I Build It on the Rock of God. So this is back to building our life on Jesus, on the rock.
I build it on the rock of God. Build it on the rock, Christ Jesus. I dig down deep and I build it on the rock. Build it on the rock of God. I hold not the rock, but the rock holds me. The rock holds me, the rock holds me. I rest on the rock and the rock holds me. Resting on the rock of God. Why should I fear when the winds sweep by? Build it on the rock, Christ Jesus. Or shake and be when the waves roll high. Build it on the rock of God. I hold not the rock, but the rock holds me. The rock holds me, the rock holds me. rock of God.
So let's remember that Jesus is the ladder to heaven. He is the way for us to have our sins forgiven and to have peace with God. Let's also remember to build our life on the rock, Jesus, because Jesus is like a solid foundation to build our life on. And let's remember that our words are like stones and we shouldn't use them to hurt people.